Quick waffle. I love a waffle.
I love a waffle. What do you put on waffle though? Because most people that have waffles that I know will put like Nutella on it, and
I don't like Nutella.
no, I'm not either.
Controversial. Blam. I
Blam.
don't like Nutella.
No, I mean, I
I
haven't
don't
got
really
any.
like chocolate spread.
I haven't got anything against chocolate spread, but it's not my go-to, and I wouldn't buy it if it wasn't for like the kids eating it. Jessie
Yeah.
eats it more than she drinks water.
Oh my gosh.
It is.
Haley has, so Isaac likes a Nutella and he puts that on his bagel or his toast in the morning. Haley used to do that, but now she's found the Biscoff spread in
Oh,
the
I love
cupboard.
Biscoff.
So
But
she has that.
I wouldn't put that on a waffle or pancakes either.
Oh, if we get an ice cream from the ice cream man, like a Mr. Whippy ice cream, we'll
Uh-huh.
we'll put the Biscoff spread on that. Not spread, but like we've got a squirty
Oh yeah.
sauce. We put it on that.
Yeah, I get that. I would put it on that.
Yeah.
What if you have pancakes or waffle? What's your go-to for that?
Fruit and white chocolate sauce.
Oh, absolutely not.
Sometimes even Reese's Pieces. In Basildon, they've got a sprinkles, and me and Haley used to go there all the time. And I used to get sometimes if we couldn't decide what we wanted, I'd order three things, and we
Well,
just
why not?
I'd be like, I really want a waffle, but I also really want a cookie dough. What shall I get? Well, I'll just order both.
I'll just get both.
And that's what I used to do. That's why I was quite horrendously obese. Um, but we've moved away from there. We no longer have that as an option.
So
But
what
no,
did you
if
have on pancakes this morning?
I had some strawberries, some raspberries, some stick it,
Stick it.
stick it, yeah,
Fruit
golden
stick.
syrup,
Oh
stick it,
yeah.
golden syrup, and
That's
some
my
sugar.
go-to. That is and sugar.
Yeah, because I
Golden
like the
syrup
texture
and
of the
sugar.
sugar. I know. I like the texture of the. I only put a small bit, not like
Yeah.
loads. I don't need
Gives
the
it a
sugar
little
to make
bit
it
of
so
crunch.
crunch. Sometimes I have nuts in it as well, but I didn't have any nuts today.
What kind of nuts?
Walnuts.
Oh yeah, I like walnuts.
Love a walnut. I love a cashew nut as well. I'll eat an entire bag walnut, like cashew nuts, and then be like, where'd those cashew nuts go?
Have you have you seen the process of cashew nuts?
Yes, that's
So
long.
long.
That's long.
So long.
Yes, so long.
Man, that is a labor of love.
Yeah, I
I
do
love
love
a cashew. No,
Yeah.
mine's always golden syrup. Golden syrup on pancakes, waffles.
Yeah, I do love also just on not on a waffle, but on a pancake, traditional lemon and sugar.
Yeah,
Love it. Sometimes I've
I
had jam
agree.
and sugar before.
That's rank.
I prefer, I mean, I'm a chocoholic, you know that. I love chocolate
Uh-huh.
coming out of year hours. But on things like that, I don't like chocolate.
No, it's weird, isn't it? I'm the
Yeah.
same. I give me one of those giant bars of Cadbury's, the
In.
whole thing
Yeah.
in one,
Out in
down,
one.
out in one. Yeah, no, I'm all about that, but I don't put chocolate things on like pancakes or.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, we've both learned something about each other.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
And we should do a fun fact, shouldn't we? I always dread
bonding.
that, when you go to like a meeting, they say you've got to say one fun fact about yourself.
Yeah,
I hate that. I don't have any fun facts.
I'm sure you do.
Nothing that could be considered fun.
Well, depends who it's fun to. A lot of the
All
stuff
right, go.
isn't
Fun
fun
fact
to
about
me.
yourself.
I wear. Fun fact: I like to wear 80s stuff. Like the other day when I went to the hospital, I wore a Care Bears t-shirt and a big skull ring
Yeah.
and turtle trainers.
All right.
So I like to mix that up a little bit. A little bit childish, a little bit like could kill you at any minute. You, fun fact, go.
See, I don't really have any fun facts. I'm incredibly boring by nature.
Tell me something
Fun
random. Look, instead of
something
fun
random.
fact, let's do random fact.
Random fact.
Yeah, and then it's up to whoever that whether it's fun or not.
Random fact.
We should call them random blams.
Random blams. Oh God, I'm panicking now. I don't.
Quick, give me a random blam.
Oh God. I'm currently rereading Harry Potter for like the 17th millionth time.
There you go. Which one?
Oh, I'm on the Half-Blood Prince at the moment.
Oh, okay. Because I think last time we spoke about you reading Harry Potter, you were on the Goblet of Fire. No,
Thanks.
Order of the Phoenix. You were.
Yeah, progressed.
Nice.
Yeah,
good. Random blam.
Random blam. I will have. I'm gonna have to write some down so the next time.
All right.
I'll be prepared because.
All right, you'll have a planned blam.
Yeah.
I'll have a planned blam. I'll have a random blam.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Blam section. Blam. Morning.
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 Well, that was quite rushed, wasn't it? I was like, morning.
Morning. Now get
Sorry
onto it.
Sorry about that, guys. That's because I was trying to get on my chair. That's why that was. I hadn't sorted myself out.
Multitask, can you?
No. Panic. Morning.
Morning. Hang on, I need to get on the chair.
I was worried it's going to make another fart sound.
Well, you do that a lot. Yeah. And I can always edit actually proper fart sounds in. Well, I don't call them farts. They're fluffs. Yeah. I'll say to the kids, oh, one of you just fluffed. I don't like the word fart. It's dirty. Yeah. Pooey word. You fluffed. Who's fluffed? No fluffing in the car. Wait until you get out. Don't like it.
That's really surprised me. Fluff.
Why has it surprised you that I don't like the word fart?
Well, it's just common. I don't know. I didn't realise it was an issue to say the word fart.
What is that? I mean, it's not an issue. I'm not like making it into an issue. Why are you making it into an issue? I just don't like the word fart. I think it sounds pooey. Yeah.
You remember years ago when I was in school, you used to call it a gruff.
Yeah, no, guff. We used to call it.
It's guff.
You're getting confused with the gruffalo.
Who's gruffed?
It's gruffed. I don't know, but I just guffed. Yeah, I know.
Or did I fluff?
Yes, I fluffed. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I don't fluff. Actually.
All right. Well, that was a small bit of light tone before we start the episode.
A little bit
because the episode is not light. It's hard.
Oh man.
Gosh, it's a hard episode. We've
just had old Piggy Pigton.
Yeah, this is hard in a different way though. So there are obviously viewer listener discretion is advised. There's it's a story of a lot of hospital procedures on a child. Yeah, it's a hard one to listen to.
Okay, so is that the trigger warning for the episode?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I didn't know what to call this episode. Because I didn't really want to give away too much information, but so I've called it Monster Mum, and it is the story of Lacey Spears.
It's familiar. I feel like am I gonna know it? It does sound familiar, but I can't.
I don't think you'll know it.
I can't place.
Yeah,
who it is.
I don't think you know it.
Oh.
So I'll tell you about Lacey Spears.
Yeah.
So Lacey Spears was born a happy, healthy baby on the 16th of October, 1987 in Dakota, Alabama. It was said that growing up, she was just a normal, happy child. But she said herself that she didn't really bond very well with her parents. So she described her mum as being emotionally unavailable, and she said that her dad just didn't have time for her because he had poor health.
Hmm.
So because he was poorly a lot, he was diagnosed with celiac disease, and
Okay.
she said that he suffered with constant like ear infections and things, and he was just quite poorly. So not really having a close relationship with her parents, she turned her attention to dolls, and she had this obsession with dolls, little baby dolls and things. And she would care for them, and she would dress them, she would bathe them, and she would almost as if they were real. She had such an
Hmm.
obsession with these dolls. And it was said that one of the neighborhood children had come over to play with Lacey. I think they'd gone to sort of like primary school together. And the little girl had gone over to play with Lacey. And they were shocked because they'd heard this commotion upstairs. And so the parents had kind of run up and they'd caught Lacey strangling this little girl
Oh.
because she'd gone over to play with Lacey's dolls. So that's
Oh.
how much of an obsession she had with these dolls. She wouldn't let anybody touch them.
Goodness.
So as a teenager, Lacey was well liked. She was described as intelligent. She was very smart. She was part of the debate team and had this way with words that she could just make people believe whatever she was saying. One of her school friends said that she could have done anything that she wanted when she left school. But Lacey began to alienate herself at school when she was in high school. She started telling lies, and she pretended that she'd broken her ankle one day, and she'd come into school in a leg like boot thing.
Yeah.
And she told her classmates that she'd broken it while she was cheerleading, which they didn't believe. She also told the friends at school and even neighbours that she was being molested at home,
Oh.
and they would allow her to stay with them whenever she wanted. While in school one day, she pretended to collapse, saying that she had anorexia and that she hadn't eaten in 5 days. But one of the boys pointed out to her that he had in fact seen her eating a hot dog the previous day.
I bet that
And
went down well.
she said that actually she had eaten a hot dog that previous day, but that was the only thing that she'd eaten in 5 days. She even went so far as to tell people that she was pregnant.
Oh.
And when a few months had gone by and she wasn't showing any signs of pregnancy at all, people obviously asked her. And she told them that she'd had an abortion at a nearby clinic, one of the clinics in town. And again, someone pointed out to her that that clinic didn't do abortions. So she said, "Oh, actually, it wasn't that clinic. It was somewhere out of town." In school, Lacey always spoke about motherhood. When people described Lacey, they said that she was quite likable, she was smart, she was intelligent, and that she really wanted to be a mother. So she would often say about how much she wished that she had a baby of her own, and she couldn't wait to be a mother, and it was something that she talked about quite frequently. And when a girl in her class became pregnant and actually had a little baby, Lacey often brought into school like nappies and milk and clothes for the baby.
Hmm.
Lacey soon began to volunteer at the local church nursery after school, and she stayed there for as long as they would allow her to every day. It was like an obsession for her to
Hmm.
work at this nursery. But one of the children's mums at the nursery actually complained about Lacey, and the mum said that Lacey made her feel very uncomfortable, and she didn't like how obsessed she had become with her son. So Lacey was asked not to return.
Hmm.
When Lacey graduated from high school, she, like I say, everybody said that she could have gone on to do whatever she wanted. But she got a job at the local daycare, and she worked there from open till close. She would get there bright and early, and she would leave when it finished. She would just work there all day. And while working at the nursery, Lacey started studying nursing at the college.
Hmm.
And while she was there, she met a fellow student called Christy. And Christy actually had a young son named Cameron, and he was 10 months old. So Lacey and Christy soon became friends, and she would offer her rides to and from college. And she would buy Cameron new clothes, and she would bring him bottles of milk. She would bring in nappies for him. She would offer to feed him and change him, and also to babysit him. So while Christy was at college, if Lacey was free, she always offered to babysit Cameron. But Christy noticed that whenever Cameron had been with Lacey for an extended period, so like a few days or something, he always came home poorly. And he always came home with severe ear infections.
Oh.
And she said that they would clear up, but then as soon as he was with Lacey again, they would come back. And Chrissy didn't, at the time, she didn't think anything of it. She thought of Lacey as a very good friend, and she was actually a godsend. Christy was a single parent, and Lacey really helped her out. So she used to buy things for Cameron, and she used to babysit him all the time and drop her off wherever she needed to go. Until one day when Christy was out with her son, Cameron, and she was pushing him in his pushchair, and a woman approached her and started making a fuss of Cameron. And the woman asked Christy if she was babysitting Lacey's son. She was like, "Oh, where's Cameron's mum? Where's Lacey?" And so that was a bit of a red flag for Christy.
Yeah, it's awkward, isn't it?
But it still wasn't, she didn't really think too much of it. But the final straw came when Lacey had Cameron for a long weekend. Christy was due to go away, and Lacey had offered to babysit Cameron. And he was due to return on the Monday. But Monday came and went, and there was no sign of Lacey or Cameron.
Oh, no.
And Lacey did eventually return. She didn't kidnap him or anything.
Didn't leg it.
She returned the next day without any explanation as to why she hadn't brought him back on Monday, or, lack of communication. And Cameron was really poorly. He had a severe ear infection, and he was just really poorly. But Christy had completely lost trust in Lacey, and she decided to break off the friendship, and she then refused Lacey any access to Cameron. Lacey then straight away formed an attachment to a new little boy, 6-month-old Jonathan, and Lacey would look after him at the nursery where she worked. But the nursery closed at 6:00 in the PM, and Jonathan's mum, Autumn, worked until 7. So Lacey would volunteer to watch Jonathan for that extra hour, as well as all the time that she had him during nursery. She would then have him for the extra hour. And she, again, began buying him clothes and bottles and toys, all with her own money, and never asking for anything in return. And she began posting pictures on social media with Jonathan. So at the time, this was when MySpace was a thing. So I don't know if you remember MySpace. It was the very, very early Facebook.
Yeah.
So she began posting pictures with Jonathan on her MySpace page, pretending that Jonathan was her own child.
Oh, God.
And she started taking him to the local church as well, and telling everybody that she was a single mother, that his father had run off with somebody else, and she was to raise the baby by herself. So she collected like free handouts and things. They would obviously give her a lot of sympathy for being such a hero, a single mother, and she obviously quite young as well at the time. But Autumn, Jonathan's mother, began noticing that her son was getting quite poorly whenever he was around Lacey, and he would come home with ear infections. And at the same time this was happening, and the breakup with Christy happened as well, Lacey actually dropped out of college, and she then spent all of her time at the nursery, where she also met another young mum called Shauna. And Shauna had two sons. She had Zach and McKelly. And Zach was a little bit older, and McKelly was 18 months old. And it was McKelly that Lacey kind of attached to.
God, that's well young, isn't it?
Yeah.
Baby.
So she actually told Shauna that Jonathan was her son. So when she would look after McKelly, it would be at the same time that she had Jonathan. So she would say to Shauna, oh, bring McKelly over. He can play with my son, Jonathan.
Yeah.
She pretended that, again, that she was Jonathan's mum. So you're going to see a pattern forming here. But Shauna noticed that over time, McKelly started to develop severe ear infections whenever he was around Lacey for too long. And she said that it was so bad, these ear infections, that pus would just like leak out of his ears.
That's really bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So not just like a little bit, but like there were severe ear infections. Lacey and Shauna were very good friends. Lacey had built up this incredibly close bond with Shauna. And she used to tell Shauna that she was being sexually assaulted quite frequently. And she would call up Shauna and say that she had just been sexually assaulted. She would call her up, and Shauna would offer her compassion and empathy and all of these things, like a shoulder to cry on. And they were really, really close. And she even told Shauna that she had fallen pregnant due to the sexual assault and had to terminate the pregnancy. Shauna felt very protective over Lacey, and she felt, Lacey was incredibly kind-hearted, and she always put others first, and she always looked after her son, and she was a very kind person. And she soon gave Lacey a key to her house, meaning that Lacey could come and go whenever she wanted. So because of the alleged sexual assaults, she would then be able to come over whenever she needed. That also meant that she now had more contact with the children and also the rest of Shauna's family. So Shauna's husband started getting red flags straight away from Lacey. He really didn't like her. He didn't like how she was with McKelly. And she would show up to the house and she wouldn't have Jonathan because Jonathan wasn't hers.
Yeah.
So Jonathan wasn't.
They must have been like, well, where's your baby then if you're a single mum?
So Shauna's husband was exactly that way, and he thought it very, very strange that she would turn up, in the day and things when she should have had Jonathan and she didn't.
Yeah.
And he really didn't believe anything that she said. So Shauna, she went to pick McKelly up from the nursery one day, so from the nursery where Lacey worked, and she got talking to another mum there. And it just so happened to be that the mum that she was talking to was Autumn, who is Jonathan's mother. So she quickly learned that Jonathan, in fact, was not Lacey's son. She obviously confronted Lacey about this. And Lacey, she kind of changed her story a little bit. And she said that actually Autumn was her stepsister. And so Jonathan was like a son to her.
Right.
So all of that isn't true at all. But Shauna she believed it. Like I say, everybody said that Lacey had this way with words and that she could make you believe whatever she was saying.
She probably wanted to believe it as well.
Yeah,
you don't want to be like, you don't want to sort of admit even to yourself, do you, that like you've been mugged off? Because thing is, if it was true, she's just lost what she would consider a good friend. Yeah.
Yep. However, both Autumn and Shauna stopped allowing Lacey to see their children. They was like, she's the absolute batshit crazy, so no longer allowed to see the.
Is that an actual quote?
And yes. And they both noticed that after a certain amount of time away from Lacey, The children stopped getting these ear infections.
Yeah.
They just didn't get them again.
Mm.
And by this time, Lacey had moved into a little flat of her own where she began seeing one of her neighbours. And his name was Chris. She'd kind of seen him in the complex. I think he lived above her or something, and she'd seen him in the complex before. And she actually asked Chris to come over to her flat and help her put up a baby crib.
Oh.
She didn't have a baby.
She didn't have a baby.
But from then on, the pair began dating.
I bet they did.
And by dating, I mean she would just go round to his, have sex, and then leave. Chris described her as being very cold and very unloving.
She just wanted a baby.
He said that he knew that she loved children. She worked at the nursery, you know. He knew that she loved children. But he had a 5-year-old son, and she never showed any interest in him at all.
Oh, interesting.
But in March 2008, Lacey got exactly what she wanted from Chris.
No.
She had fallen pregnant.
Oh.
And she was over the moon. And she had discussed it with Chris, you know. She'd said to Chris, you know, I'm pregnant. And they decided to get married. And they had all of these plans. They'd both actually agreed as well to name the baby Caden. However, not long into the pregnancy, Lacey told Chris that he wasn't the father.
Oh.
She just announced one day, actually, you're not the father. I don't want to be with you. And she threatened to call the police and get a restraining order if he ever tried to contact her again.
Jesus, Lacey.
But Chris knew that the baby was his. And on December the 3rd, 2008, Lacey gave birth to a beautiful, happy, healthy baby boy, and she named him Garnet Spears. Garnet was born healthy, absolutely perfectly normal baby boy, and they were sent home on Friday the 5th of December, and by Sunday he was back in the hospital.
Don't say with an ear infection.
Lacey told doctors that Garnet had been pulling at his ears, which indicated an ear infection, and that he had a high temperature and that he was suffering from jaundice.
Oh, blimey.
Doctors examined Garnet and found that his temperature was absolutely normal and he was, in fact, perfectly healthy. In the coming weeks, Lacey would take Garnet to 2 different hospitals almost daily, saying that he wouldn't eat. And if he did eat, he wouldn't keep it down and that he would vomit like constantly. And she told doctors as well that he was bleeding from his ears.
Oh.
So over the course of a few weeks, Garnet was examined by both hospitals, and they found that, again, he was perfectly healthy. His ears weren't bleeding. There was no sign of infection at all. And when fed a bottle, he would take it happily and not vomit. He said that they would feed him and he would be perfectly fine to take the bottle, and he kept it down. On January the 13th, the nurse at one of these hospitals noted down in Garnet's medical records that she believed Lacey was suffering from Munchausen syndrome by proxy. For those that don't know, Munchausen syndrome is a psychological condition where the person will pretend to be ill for attention, and they will even go so far as to make themselves ill. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's the generic overview of Munchausen syndrome. So Munchausen syndrome by proxy is when the person pretends that somebody else is ill to gain attention. And again, they'll go so far as to purposely make that other person ill. And normally you see this in a parent and child relationship where the parent purposely makes the child poorly, but it can also be from person to like caregiver to the elderly, and it can even be nurse doctor to patient, which has happened before. And most of the time in these cases there is some medical knowledge or medical background So the person that either has the Munchausens or is, Munchausen by proxy, they kind of have a knowledge of the system, so they can work it to their advantage. And there's actually a very famous American case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her mother.
That's what I thought this was.
Dee Dee. The Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her mother Dee Dee is it is a very famous case, and it's great. It's a great story. It's I don't even know words for it. But if anybody wants me to cover that story, I'll be happy to cover that story, because it's fucking nuts.
Yeah, it is nuts. It is absolutely nuts. What the extent that these people put like their own children through and their own family members through is horrendous, like surgeries and everything.
Yep.
Crazy.
Yep. So that's another factor of Munchausen's, is that they won't hesitate to either undergo an operation or put someone else through unnecessary physical exams, unnecessary medication, unnecessary surgeries for their own purpose. And it is all for the attention, adoration, and sympathy of others.
Yeah.
So, although it was noted down in Garnet's medical notes that the nurse believed that Lacey was suffering from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, it was never followed up. And that wasn't the last time that happened either. So by late January, Lacey took Garnet to a third hospital and stated that he was losing weight due to the fact that he wasn't eating, and if he did, he would be constantly sick. And I think, from what I've gathered, that in America, medical records aren't shared the way that they are over here. You know, if you go to your doctors, they've got your medical history from where you've moved from
Not
the different
always.
doctors.
Not always, because I've had that recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had to go for a blood test, but because I'm still under the hospital in Romford,
Yeah.
and obviously now I've moved to Suffolk, when I had to have my blood test done, I had to go to the hospital in Romford, otherwise they wouldn't have got the results.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's maybe, I don't know, bigger areas or something, but no, that is the case over here still, which is ridiculous, because you think if your records are on the NHS, why can't any doctor from all around the country access?
Yeah, I thought they just used your NHS number.
So did I.
And brought it up. But
So did I. Yeah, no, they don't recently.
So,
I've had a whole thing with moving my medical records and applying for access and all that. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, ridiculous.
Well, yeah, that's obviously then the same in America. They don't have between different doctor. It's down to you to relay that information.
Right.
So for Lacey to go to different doctors meant that she could avoid detection. If somebody started getting suspicious, she could avoid detection.
She would tell them.
She could also just make anything up that she wanted. So the third hospital that she took Garnet to, or the third doctors that she took Garnet to, had no idea that the previous doctors had suspected Lacey of Munchausen's.
Right.
At the age of around 7 or 8 weeks old, Garnet was diagnosed with reflux and underwent a surgery that closed the end of his esophagus.
Oh, God.
So that it didn't close it, but it kind of narrowed it. So it made it physically impossible for him to get reflux and for him to vomit.
Oh, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yep.
Yeah.
A few days after the surgery, Lacey took Garnet back to one of the previous hospitals and said that Garnet wouldn't take a bottle and that he kept being sick. So this hospital didn't know that he'd had a procedure that made it physically impossible for him to vomit.
Blimey.
So the nurse actually took Garnet from Lacey and she tried to feed him with the bottle that Lacey had brought with her. And the nurse found actually that Garnet wouldn't feed from this bottle. So he was then given a nasal feeding tube.
Oh.
And from the day Garnet was born, Lacey would continuously update her social media account with all the doctor's trips, all the different things that Garnet had been suffering from, or that she said that he'd been suffering from. When he was in the hospital, on the bed, unconscious, getting his feeding tube fed, she would take a picture and post it to her social media. And she captioned it, "My poor baby had to get a feeding tube." So it was all
Because
over,
of you.
all over social media. And you can imagine the sympathy that would then get her.
Yeah, I mean, that must be like the best thing ever for her.
Social media.
Well, that picture, getting
Yeah.
that picture and putting it on social media, and then getting all that attention of people going, "Oh my God, you must be going through hell, you poor thing." I can imagine all the sympathy that she must have got from that. It must have been exactly what she wanted.
Yep.
Picture.
On February the 11th, 3-month-old Garnet was taken back to the hospital.
3 months?
When he was 3 months old.
Jeez.
Lacey told the nurses that he wouldn't take a bottle. And this time, when the nurses took the bottle and tried to feed Garnet, he took it happily. Garnet immediately became lethargic and really unwell, and had like a battery of tests to find out what had happened or what was wrong. And a blood test revealed that he had near lethal levels of sodium in his system. And he was immediately airlifted to a special pediatric hospital where he was given a spinal tap at 3 months old. And the doctors managed to slowly and carefully lower his sodium levels. All the while, Lacey was taking pictures and posting photos of her son near death on social media. Once Garnet started to make a recovery, a gastrointestinal specialist went to examine Garnet to find out why he was having so much trouble feeding. Because that's all they're being told constantly. Lacey's going there saying he's not feeding. But what she found was that Garnet would always happily take a bottle. And over the course of 2 weeks, he was examined and underwent a battery of horrible and uncomfortable and probably painful tests to find out what was wrong with him. But everything came back normal. And it wasn't long before the specialist pediatric hospital started to suspect that Lacey was suffering from Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And at that point, Garnet was separated from Lacey for 4 days.
Good.
They said that he was kind of quarantined away from her, and he ate happily. He kept all of his food down. He wasn't poorly, and he recovered very well. But despite that, Garnet was discharged into Lacey's care on February the 24th. It was said that hospitals were so worried about getting sued that instead of saying something, they just didn't. So in Garnet's 5 short months of life, the word Munchausen's had been mentioned 3 times by 3 separate hospitals and not once followed up.
Brilliant.
By the end of March, Garnet was seen by an ear, nose and throat specialist due to Lacey's insistence, because he was constantly suffering from ear infections. And the doctor performed a minor surgery on him to help relieve some of the symptoms from the ear infections. But Lacey said that he hadn't helped at all. So he was then referred to a specialist. The doctor that had performed that surgery on his ears sent over Garnet's medical records with a note to this specialist saying that he believed Lacey may be suffering from Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
Good.
But again, nothing was happened. Between March and June, Lacey took Garnet to the hospital every day, saying that he was being constantly sick. And the doctors were absolutely baffled because they couldn't seem to find anything wrong with him at all. And they again were unaware that he had had an operation that made it physically impossible for him to be sick.
Yeah.
And on the 20th of June, Lacey rushed Garnet to the hospital as he was bleeding from his ears, eyes, nose, and mouth. And he was immediately airlifted to this specialist pediatric hospital where he was treated and then released.
Was he? He was actually bleeding from.
Yeah, he was actually bleeding from the orifices.
God, What, blimey. What called that?
I couldn't find out what he was treated for or what happened, but it would be a drop in platelets
Yeah.
that causes
I don't
blood
know
to come out of
how
your orifices.
I don't know how you would do that unless it was some kind of like poisoning, or I mean, how would you?
Chemo drops your
Yeah,
platelets.
yeah. Would they suddenly? Yeah. How would she cause that?
I don't know. Yeah, but I couldn't find anywhere
Mm.
what had caused that. So after days on end of taking Garnet to the hospital, complaining that he wouldn't feed and that he was being sick, on September the 1st, Lacey demanded that the hospital place a feeding port into Garnet's stomach.
Oh,
The hospital refused to perform
good.
any such procedure. Hold your horses.
Oh,
They refused any such procedure as they couldn't find anything medically wrong with Garnet. So Lacey took Garnet from hospital to hospital to hospital until she found one that was willing to perform the procedure. So at 9 months old, Garnet was fitted with a feeding port directly into his stomach.
Jesus.
And this was posted all over social media with Garnet, like poor Garnet, like hooked up to wires everywhere.
Yeah.
And she'd captioned it. You know, you can write a little, we post a picture, you write a little something on it. And she'd just put, Mummy, I feel bad. My belly hurts. And for the remainder of Garnet's first year, Lacey continued to take him to the hospital with constant ear infections. In January 2010, Garnet was just over a year old. He was taken to the hospital where Lacey claimed that he was now suffering from seizures. She would also take Garnet to the local churches to gain sympathy, and she would tell them that Garnet was the result of molestation and that Garnet had a wealth of medical issues. She told the churches that he was born without muscles in his stomach, that he needed a cochlear ear implant, that he had had previously open heart surgery and had contracted MRSA.
Oh, God.
She told the church that she had recently lost a baby as well, and she even falsified a death certificate, which she would then show people at the church to kind of almost back up what she was saying. So at first, she would receive donations from the church. She would receive money from the church and toys for Garnet. Obviously, sympathy, shoulders to cry on and things like that. But soon people stopped believing what Lacey was saying.
Good.
And she was actually asked not to return.
Oh, what, to the church?
To the church.
Goodness.
Yeah.
That must be bad, like, because churches welcome like
I think
everyone,
it also
don't they?
turned out that she was stealing as well from the church, but I couldn't find out information on what she was actually stealing or anything. So it said that she was asked, because of her lying and her stealing, she was asked not to return.
Oh, God.
In July 2010, Lacey moved to Florida to take care of her grandma. And here she had a whole new world of people that didn't know her background and didn't know that she was full of shit. And she could feed them all these anything
all over again.
Yeah, all over again. A whole new load of people to shower her with sympathy and adoration and praise her for being such a wonderful mother and so caring, so courageous, so strong.
Yeah.
But I think it's people start to see through things, don't they? And one of her friends said that she noticed that Garnet didn't have any trouble feeding at all, and that whenever she'd been around Garnet, he happily ate with all the other children. He wasn't fussy, and he had a very healthy appetite. And one of her new friends said that they noticed that Lacey was sometimes very cruel to Garnet. And she would scream at him for no reason, and she would like pull him about harshly and like grab him by the arm. But then she said as soon as Garnet started crying, Lacey would scoop him up and she would care for him, and she would like adopt this caring motherly role, like, oh, don't cry, mummy's here. but it was her that had caused him that pain and discomfort.
I'm feeling so sad for Garnet.
Oh, don't! I told you this is why this episode was so hard for me to write.
It was so horrible.
I took so many breaks when I was writing it and researching it because it was just horrendous. And there will be points in this where I probably will get a bit emotional. So
what? You?
I know. I'll turn the camera off.
You'll see it here first, people. Never happened before.
Nope. Garnet's second birthday rolled around, and he was seen to be enjoying his birthday cake and all the other party food. You know, he was a normal, happy 2-year-old boy, and he had no problem eating. So he
was having his birthday cake.
He had his birthday cake. But still, Lacey claimed that Garnet had an eating disorder and that he was constantly poorly. But in these next few years, she kind of stopped taking Garnet to the hospital quite as much. But what she did instead, she would visit different mum and baby groups and get sympathy that way. And she was constantly posting on social media. So like day after day after day, there would be a different thing wrong with Garnet. She would then sometimes post a picture that he'd been out, I don't know, sledding or something, and then the next day he was really poorly. The next day he was poorly with something else. Like it was a constant barrage of saying that he was poorly. So through the remainder of 2010 and 2011, Garnet's life was just a series of social media posts, and they included a severe toothache. Then the next day she posted that Garnet suffered from a spinal disorder, and then it was another ear infection, and then it was a fever. But as I just said, her posts were contradictory, and she would post about Garnet being sick one day, and then the next day she would post pictures of him playing happily on his trampoline or something. But there was only so much sympathy people have when they're just constantly reading these social, when you get that person on social media that just posts all this shit, and eventually you're like, oh, block. So on March 31st, 2011, Lacey created a Facebook group and included only her friends, none of her family, because her family knew the truth. But they included all of her friends and posted that 9 months previously, Garnet's father, a police officer called Blake, had been killed while working. And she said, this is a quote from the post that she put: 9 months ago, Garnet's father and my lifelong best friend was tragically killed. Tonight, while driving home, Garnet woke from a deep sleep and simply said, Mummy, Daddy loves you, which didn't happen. But obviously she then had this new wealth of sympathy.
Yeah, sympathy. Thing is, there's a whole load of people out there that she's told that Garnet was conceived through sexual molestation.
Yep. Yeah, so that she moved to this. Moved to this new area, and I bet she was one of them people that just added everybody on Facebook. All that didn't even know him, just add. So obviously people were like commenting, saying how strong she was and what a good mother she was. And then from then on, she created a blog called Garnet's Journey, which is still up now. So most of these social media posts she deleted.
Right.
So there isn't many social media posts about, but this blog is still there. You can go on the blog and see it. So she posted pictures of Garnet, and underneath it would be like, oh, Garnet really struggled today without his dad. And, this is the first time we went swimming without Garnet's dad. All these different posts. She put out an incredibly long post one day, and I'm going to read it to you. So she'd named this post, Mummy, where is my daddy? And it reads, like any other morning in our home, I stood at the kitchen sink somewhere between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. washing dishes. It was something that had to be done, so the time meant nothing. I peered through the kitchen window to see my son peacefully sitting in his rock chair watching cartoons. Yes, that's right. 1 a.m. and he's awake. He decides when we start our day. I peacefully accepted that there will be a day when he sleeps, but for now, we enjoy our early mornings. Thinking about what needed to be done that day and how to make our errands, doctor's visits, whatever it may be, as fun and peaceful for Garnet, I was lost in thought, only to be drawn back to reality when a little hand pulled on my shorts and said, "Mummy, where's my daddy?" Now, I had spent some time pondering how I would answer this question, and this wasn't the first time he had asked, but I knew until I felt safe answering him, he would continue to ask. Do I give details? Do I tell him the truth, or do I butter it up? As a parent, we want to protect our child from anything that could harm or hurt them. So answering this simple question was a challenge, but I'd finally found a way to explain to Garnet just where his daddy was. I placed the dish I was washing in the sink, dried my hands, bent down to his level so he would know I was fully connected to him. I looked my son in the face and said, "Your daddy is in you. He is in your ears, eyes, nose, arms, legs, heart, and soul. Your daddy is half of you, and mummy is the other half." I thought to myself, okay, I've answered him. Garnet just peered at me for a moment and with a sweet, blissful voice replied, "Awesome," and ran off. Awesome, I thought. How could someone at such a young age find that awesome? Nevertheless, he thought it was awesome, and for today he was pleased and at peace with my answer. I know the day will come when Garnet asked where is daddy, but for today, he thinks it's awesome that his daddy is in his ears, eyes, mouth, nose, and arm. No matter where Garnet's father is, he will always be in him and he will always be part of him. What do you say to that?
I just find it really irritating.
Your face, I can see your face as you're fuming.
Yeah. I find it really irritating that people like this have children and then they're left for years and years to just damage that human being.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just find it irritating. And
so when Garnet was around 4, Lacey, she moved into this like self-sustaining complex called the Fellowship.
ooh, of the rings.
Not quite, not quite. But it was like a self-sustaining community, and she was given room and board in exchange for work. Garnet would go to the on-site school, and there was also an on-site doctor's.
Hmm.
Lacey would come to share a room with a woman called Christy. This is different Christy to the woman at the beginning. And she noticed that Lacey would steal her clothes and blatantly wear them in front of her.
Claire does that.
I do it to Josie.
You do that with earrings.
I did that to earrings, yeah. Did you not know that they were mine now? But she would just deny everything. Just that, when she was confronted, Christy would be like, I think those are my jeans. Lacey would be like, no, they're not. Just completely deny it.
Yeah. You're like,
have no knowledge.
yes, they are.
They absolutely, it's got my name in the back.
Yeah. Nope.
It's not though. Yeah, I wrote that in there. Yeah, she just would stick to her story. Even when she was called out of a lie, vehemently stick to her story. But she noticed as well that despite Lacey's claims of Garnet's multitude of health problems, that Garnet was perfectly happy. He ate well and he played happily with the other children. And she witnessed Lacey harming Garnet when she thought no one was watching. And she also witnessed Lacey putting things into Garnet's feeding tube, despite the fact
He
that
still had the feeding tube.
he still has the feeding tube,
Oh
despite the fact that he would have eaten normally all day. She was seen putting things into his feeding tube. And sometimes it was things that were really strange. She said that sometimes she would put like spicy food in it, like things that
Oh,
you just that you
it's
had
going
no
to
business.
upset his belly.
2 days after moving into the fellowship, Garnet was taken to the on-site doctor, where Lacey claimed that he had a severe ear infection. The doctor examined Garnet, he couldn't find anything. And I think it said that he was referred to a different hospital off site.
This ear infection thing is it's got to be connected to the fact that her dad suffered with ear infections all the time.
Right, yeah, maybe.
It has to be.
Yeah. So Lacey's constant lies and stealing were too much for Christie. She had previously raised her concerns with the fellowship leaders regarding Lacey, and they just told her to, keep quiet. It wasn't her business what she thought about Garnet or whether she thought that he was ill or not. But Christie said she couldn't bear to witness the abuse any longer, so she actually left the community. Lacey, by that time, had also started accusing some of the men of the fellowship of sexually harassing her and exposing themselves to her. One of the men and his family were even asked to leave the community because of this. On March the 22nd, 2013, Garnet was taken to the local pediatrician, where, being a new hospital, Lacey was asked to recount Garnet's medical history. And she told the doctors that Garnet had aspirated at birth and that he'd been taken to intensive care. She said that when he was 2 months old, his weight had dropped to around 4 pounds. And by the time he was 9 weeks old, he'd had abdominal surgery.
What's aspirate?
Stopped breathing, I think. Aspirated.
Oh, okay.
He stopped breathing. She said that after his abdominal surgery at 9 weeks old, he had started to experience seizures and had been put on life support for 6 weeks. She said that he had the feeding tube in his stomach, which he did have, and she said that he'd previously contracted MRSA, which caused him to have frequent ear infections. The doctor examined Garnet and could find nothing wrong with him. So he was referred to a gastroenterologist to determine whether or not he still needed the feeding tube, which absolutely should have been done. Lacey told the gastroenterologist that Garnet had Crohn's disease and celiac disease, but the doctor had asked Lacey to schedule a feeding evaluation for Garnet, and that was to determine how many nutrients he was getting from, like, orally from his food versus the feeding tube in his stomach. But Lacey never arranged the evaluation, despite the doctor constantly reminding her, do this. But she knew that he didn't need the feeding tube. But it was the only way that she could keep that, it's like a level of control almost. And that's how she made him sick via the feeding pool. So when Garnet finally started kindergarten, this was another opportunity for Lacey to meet a whole new crowd of people and to share all of Garnet's medical concerns and medical history with all of these people. But it wasn't long before every parent knew about Lacey's struggles with Garnet's health. And also, we mustn't forget, her dearly beloved deceased best friend / Garnet's fictitious father.
Oh, yeah.
Mustn't forget that. So one lie that she'd started telling at the school was that Garnet had cochlear ear implants. When one parent mentioned, excuse me, but cochlear ear implants are visible, and Garnet doesn't appear to have visible cochlear ear implants. Lacey said that Garnet did in fact have cochlear ear implants, but that it was a new technology that had just been brought out, and it did not require
it was invisible.
it was an invisible device. It didn't require an outward visible device. Now, this mum was pretty confident that Lacey was talking absolute nonsense. So she went home and she researched, and she couldn't find anything at all about these new types of cochlear ear implants.
That's a dangerous lie, isn't it? That's like saying, oh yeah, no, so-and-so did have cancer, but we've tried this new miracle cure and now they're cured. It's like you're going to get everybody coming to you and going, where the hell did you go and who the hell did you speak to?
What is this cure?
Yeah. Idiot.
But so this mum found out that she was talking nonsense, and she then confronted Lacey, and she was like,
yes,
I don't think you're telling the truth. But Lacey stuck resolutely to her story. She 100% stuck by her guns and said, nope, he's got a new technology. Just because you haven't found it. Yep. Just because you haven't found it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. This is what he's got. On the 3rd of December, 2014, Garnet celebrated his 5th birthday. And by this time, he'd fitted in very nicely at kindergarten. He was well liked. His teacher said that Garnet was a happy and healthy little boy, and he always ate his packed lunch at school. And that the teacher had actually asked Lacey to provide a bigger lunch for him because he always ate it all, and he was always like, I want more.
Hungry.
She said that Garnet was a bundle of joy, and everybody that met him said that he was just this energetic little boy, and he would light up the room, and he was funny, and he was cheeky, and he was caring. At the beginning of January, Lacey kept Garnet home from school for a few days, and she'd emailed his teacher saying that Garnet had a fever of 105 degrees. And on the 10th of January, Lacey took Garnet to the doctor, saying that he had a fever and the flu, and that he was having a multitude of problems in school, that he couldn't concentrate, and that he didn't seem to be learning anything, and the teacher said he was disruptive and all of these things. But the doctor examined Garnet and found that he was fine. On January 13th, Lacey took Garnet to a different doctor, saying that he had a temperature of 105 fever for 5 days. And the doctor took his temperature, and the temperature came back as normal. And he was perfectly healthy. So
how strange.
Lacey took Garnet home. But that night, just before midnight, she rushed Garnet to the hospital, saying that he'd had 2 seizures and that he was suffering from a severe headache, that he was dry heaving and had explosive diarrhea. She said that he'd had these symptoms before, as he suffered previously from a condition called hypernatremia when he was a baby. Now, hypernatremia is a condition where you have elevated levels of sodium in the blood. But Garnet's test results showed only slightly elevated sodium levels of around 147. Now, the highest normal sodium level is around 145. So it's only slightly elevated. So although it was a little bit high, it wasn't high enough to have caused the seizures, the severe headaches, the explosive diarrhea. So finding nothing really wrong with him, they said that his sodium levels will just go down by themselves. He was discharged. 3 days later, Lacey took Garnet to the pediatrician, saying that he was suffering from seizures and had a high sodium level, and that the hospital she had previously taken him to was doing nothing about it. But on examination, the doctor found that Garnet had no seizure activity at all, and that he was, again, perfectly healthy. But he referred Garnet to a pediatric neurologist for further tests. On January 17th, Garnet's teacher actually made an unexpected stop at Lacey's house to check on Garnet because he hadn't been in school. So the last thing she knew was that Garnet was poorly. So she'd actually stopped by. But before she could kind of knock on the door or, go and visit them, she'd actually seen through the window that Lacey was holding Garnet down on the floor. And there was an IV pole next to them with a discolored fluid, like a bag of fluid hanging on the IV pole. But the teacher she just turned around and left. She didn't know what was going on. She didn't know if that was, how he was supposed to be fed or anything. So
I'm nosy, so I would have been bogging through that window.
what are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing?
But it wasn't long after that incident that Lacey texted her friend asking to borrow her car, saying that she needed to take Garnet to the hospital as he was having a seizure. And she refused the offer of a lift, and she said that she wanted to drive herself. During the drive to the hospital, she pulls the car over and she took a picture of Garnet's limp body in his car seat and she posted it on social media.
Oh, great.
This hospital that he was rushed to was a different hospital that he'd previously been to. So when she got there, she had to again relay this information regarding Garnet's medical history. But what she said to the doctor was that when Garnet was a baby, he'd suffered from hyponatremia and that his sodium level had reached 200. And the doctor was immediately suspicious because sodium level of 200 would have been catastrophically fatal. Like there was no way it could have been 200. That would have been fatal to anybody, let alone a little baby. Nevertheless, he examined Garnet. He had a slightly elevated sodium level. He was a little bit limp, he's a little bit lethargic, but he had no seizure activity. But he enlisted the help of a pediatric neurologist, where he disclosed to the neurologist that he had concerns that Lacey was potentially suffering from Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Over the next few days, Garnet was hooked up to an EEG machine to monitor his brain activity for any seizures. But obviously he didn't have any. During his stay at the hospital, Garnet was happy, he was healthy, he ate. So doctors told Lacey that providing Garnet's MRI came back the next morning, which is the 19th of January, as long as that came back clear, they would be discharged and were free to go home. At 10:15 that morning, unbeknownst to Lacey, she is caught on camera taking Garnet, a happy, healthy Garnet, from his hospital bed, carrying the connector port to his feeding tube and taking that and Garnet into the bathroom. The EEG machine that Garnet had been hooked up to had a camera on it.
Oh.
The camera was there to capture any seizures that he might have had, to go alongside, to coincide with the brain activities. The camera was to capture that as well. 3 minutes later, Lacey is seen carrying a limp and lethargic Garnet out of the bathroom and placing him back on his bed. She then goes back into the bathroom to collect the feeding port and a clear bag. She then pulls up a chair next to Garnet's bed and she reaches over to grab the call button and holds it. Just waits. Garnet very quickly becomes quite poorly and he rolls over onto all fours and he starts dry heaving. So remember that he couldn't vomit. It was physically impossible for him to, but his body was obviously trying to get something out and he couldn't. So Lacey immediately hits the emergency call button, the one that she's got ready in her hand.
Yeah.
The pediatrician comes in and he gives Garnet some anti-sickness medication. But then Garnet starts having explosive diarrhea. So he's sent for a blood test. Meanwhile, Lacey snaps a picture of Garnet.
Oh, for God's sake.
And pops it on social media. When the blood results come back, Lacey specifically asks the doctors what Garnet's sodium levels were. But they had come back somewhat normal. Not massively high, but somewhat normal. So after the sickness and diarrhea had subsided, Garnet, he appeared to be feeling better and he was seen on his bed and he was playing with his toys. At 4:19 p.m, Lacey is seen on the EEG camera again taking Garnet into the bathroom with his feeding port and a cup. And Then a few minutes later, comes out, puts him back on his bed. Shortly after, Garnet rolls over onto all fours again. He starts this dry heaving, and he's complaining of a severe headache. And he's given more anti-sickness medication and pain medication. But this time, he wasn't getting any better.
Yeah, because by this point, they wouldn't have seen the footage from the
Nope.
EEG camera, would they?
Nope. At 5:30 p.m., Garnet had a full-blown seizure.
Oh.
Doctors had to give him like a ton of anti-seizure medication to stop him from seizing. He then had trouble breathing, and his O2 levels dropped so low that doctors had to intubate him. When his bloods were checked again, doctors were astounded to see that Garnet's sodium levels had jumped from 144 a few hours ago to 182, which was dangerously high.
Yeah.
Garnet was immediately airlifted to a pediatric special hospital where en route, doctors from that hospital had phoned through to the other hospital to update the specialist hospital regarding Garnet's medical condition. The specialist at that other end, he refused to believe that Garnet's sodium had jumped up so incredibly high in the space of a few hours, especially since he hadn't had anything to eat. He believed that the test was wrong. He was quite annoyed at the hospital that they hadn't just redone the test because obviously it was wrong. So he ordered another blood test for Garnet for when he arrived at the hospital. However, when Garnet arrived, the specialist saw that he had a feeding port. He said it was then crystal clear how Garnet's sodium level had increased so drastically.
Yeah.
He believed that someone had given Garnet a high dose of sodium chloride directly through his feeding port, and that would explain why his sodium had jumped up and also why he had high levels of chloride in his blood. The doctor questioned Lacey, and he told her that it was metabolically impossible for a 5-year-old Garnet to have produced the extreme sodium levels found in his system. It couldn't be done. But she denied any knowledge of how that could have happened.
She sticks to her stories, doesn't she?
She really does. So Garnet was at the PICU in the specialist hospital. So while he was there, they began to carefully lower Garnet's sodium levels, and he regained consciousness. And at this point, when he regained consciousness, doctors told Lacey that they were going to remove Garnet's breathing tube, but Lacey asked if they could keep it in.
Feeding tube or breathing tube?
Breathing tube. What did I say?
You said breathing tube.
Yeah, breathing tube, because don't forget, he'd stopped breathing. He was intubated.
Got you.
So doctors said that they were going to remove it because he was conscious now, and she was like, can you keep it in? But the doctors were like, absolutely not, because the longer that breathing tube was in, the high risk of infection they had. And so they removed it. And doctors noted that Garnet seemed to be improving and that he had slept well that night. However, at 7:30 a.m. that morning, doctors responded to the emergency call button in Garnet's room. And he was shocked to see that the happy, playful Garnet that he had encountered a few hours ago was unconscious and lifeless. And he noticed that there was an empty water bottle just under Garnet's bed. And he yelled at the nurse to grab the water bottle, and he was flabbergasted. He said that he was angry. He was shocked. He had explicitly told Lacey not to give her son any water, as the water can cause brain damage. And this is something that I had to research because I didn't understand why that would have happened. But it's something called rapid correction of hyponatremia. So the way that your body balances sodium is by, if you've got too much, then you get thirsty and you drink more water. Your kidneys kind of regulate it and things like that. But what basically happens is because there's too much sodium in the body, having too much water flushes it out, and the kidneys can't get rid of it quick enough. So it's sent to the brain. It makes its way to the brain, and it causes the brain to swell. So the doctor was astounded that Lacey had allowed Garnet to consume that volume of water. It was a big bottle of water, when he had specifically said what the consequences of that would be. Garnet was intubated again as he'd completely stopped breathing. His pupils were completely dilated and they weren't responding to any light. The doctor immediately ordered a CAT scan, and it showed that Garnet was completely brain dead.
Oh.
I told you.
That's awful.
His brain had swelled so much that it had crushed his brainstem. After the doctors notified Lacey, he then went straight to the head of the Child Abuse Pediatric Centre and reported his concerns. He believed that Lacey had poisoned Garnet with salt. The police were informed and were at the hospital that day to interview the doctors and Lacey about what had happened. The doctors told the police that medically, there was absolutely no way Garnet's sodium could have jumped up by itself in 3 hours. Detectives interviewing Lacey said that they know that everybody grieves differently, but Lacey didn't appear to be grieving at all. 1 minute she was crying with no tears, and then she would immediately stop to answer the detectives' questions. The investigators questioned Lacey about when the last time she had used Garnet's feeding port was. She told them that she hadn't used it in about a week, but obviously the EEG machine had showed Lacey taking Garnet into the bathroom with his feeding port connector. The next morning, Garnet had a series of brain death tests. These are required to confirm that he was actually brain dead, and they were required to be able to pronounce him like clinically dead. On January 23rd, 2014, at 10:20 a.m., Garnet Spears was pronounced dead and was taken off of life support. An autopsy was conducted, and the mortician found that there was no evidence of brain tumours. He inspected the stomach and his intestines and found that Garnet had never suffered with Crohn's disease or celiac disease, and he ruled Garnet's death a homicide.
Good.
A murder investigation was quickly started. A search warrant was granted for Lacey's property, and they immediately began searching it, and they found on the kitchen tables, like, it looked like a shrine to Garnet. There was a photo of him, and it was surrounded by candles and countless bottles and boxes of medication and an open bottle of salt.
Oh.
They also found in the apartment a few empty containers of salt, an IV pole with a feeding bag still on it, and all of that was taken for evidence, minus the feeding bag. They assumed that it contained breast milk, so they didn't bother taking that IV bag that was hung up. A neighbour of Lacey's told detectives later on that Lacey had secretly phoned her from the hospital early Wednesday, January 22nd. So while Garnet was brain dead, but before he'd been taken off of life support. And Lacey had told her neighbour to go into her house or her flat and remove that bag from the IV pole and to get rid of it. So the neighbour did. She didn't know what was she was being asked to do. So she went into the home and she removed that bag from the IV, but she decided not to throw it away. She kept it in her cupboard for a few days, and then she kind of the gravity of the situation, I think, hit her, and she decided to take that bag to the police. Once that bag was tested, the bag contained an extremely high level of salt in the fluid. The police also had a warrant to collect Lacey's phone records, and I've actually read through these phone records, and we'll put the screenshots of them on the YouTube video, but I'll read some of them out for you because They're just shocking. So these records are about 20 days worth of records. So it's about a week and a half before Garnet's death, and then about a week after. So on January 14th, 3 days before Garnet was rushed to the hospital having a seizure, Lacey had been Googling normal sodium levels in a child, salt and sodium, dangers of high sodium levels in a child, signs of elevated sodium in a child. On January 15th, she texted a friend to say that Garnet so far had 2 seizures and that his sodium levels were 189, but that wasn't true. On January 16th, she messaged that same friend saying that Garnet had now had 5 seizures. And a few hours later, she messaged again to say that he was having his 6th seizure and that he was screaming in pain. But 10 minutes prior to that text message, she was looking on Amazon to buy different things. It was like a cookbook or something like that. On January 17th, when Garnet's taken to the hospital and fitted with the EEG cab, there's a ton of searches about the EEG machine. She's like constantly searching about the EEG machine. And on the 19th of January, when Lacey was told that Garnet would be discharged from the hospital because he was fine, she had then started searching iodized salt. So while she was in the bed next to Garnet, she was searching ways in which she could kill him. On the 20th of January, there's a ton of messages all coming in from different people saying that, all just sort of like love and support messages and things like that, saying, "I've read your Facebook message, I can't believe it." So while all this was happening, she was posting it on social media. A day before Garnet was removed from life support, so on the 22nd of January, Lacey texted, presumably a relative, and it says, "G's beautiful soul left to join the angels yesterday morning. He's still on life support and will remain that way until you and Grandma get here. Then I'll decide when it's time to turn the machine off. G's gone," with loads of exclamation marks. Then on the 23rd, when Garnet was pronounced dead, there's just this huge list of outgoing phone calls. So while she'd been at the hospital with Garnet, she'd had friends visit her as well. So friends had been in the hospital visiting her. And one of her friends said, this is a quote from what one of her friends said, "Her behaviour was just weird in the hospital. It was not the behaviour of a grieving mother. She was more concerned about what everyone else was saying or what investigators were asking people or what people were saying on Facebook than putting all that aside and taking care of her child." So she was constantly updating Facebook. So these are some of the posts that I found. And
she switches it off and on,
yeah,
doesn't she? The whole thing is like this one big act, you know. And she's like, I'll be all upset and teary and that, and oh, I'd need to get some cat food on Amazon.
That's exactly it. Yep.
Yeah.
So she wrote, "My sweet angel is in the hospital for the 23rd time. Please pray he gets to come home soon." And then on the 22nd of January, while Garnet's on life support, she took a picture of her brain dead son and wrote, "Tonight, I sat at the bedside of my beautiful, amazing, lively, one-of-a-kind son's bed. Knowing his soul is already with the angels, there's just no words to describe this horrible nightmare. Please pray Garnet's journey into the next life is nothing short of amazing." And then there was one final post on early January 23rd saying, "Garnet the Great journeyed onward today at 10:20 a.m. After a lengthy trial, on the June 17th, 26-year-old Lacey Spears was charged with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter in the death of her 5-year-old son, Garnet. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison and will be eligible for parole when she is 46. And that's as far as I can go with that story.
Not really even able to comment on how evil that
When
is.
I think I was probably about 16 years old, I read a book and it was called Sickened. Have you read that book?
Me too.
and it was about a mother that suffered with Munchausen by proxy,
Yeah.
and she went so far as to put her child through open heart surgery when it was completely unwarranted. And my brain can't comprehend it.
I don't understand why you would ever want that kind of attention for yourself anyway. But
No.
to want that attention so much so that you're willing to put your baby through its whole 5 years of life filled with torture and surgeries and procedures and things like that, and then you're the cause of their death
for your own gratification, absolutely.
Yeah, for
But
attention.
the main reason that I wanted to do this story was because there's a documentary on Netflix, and it's a great documentary, and I think it's called something like Looking After Maya or Taking Care of Maya.
Taking Care of Maya, yeah.
I think we discussed it, didn't we? But I don't think you've watched it.
I haven't had the guts to watch it yet.
It was really, really eye-opening. And it was about a family trying to take care of their daughter who was poorly, who was genuinely poorly. And so they took her daughter to the hospital on many occasions for treatment. However, this was misconstrued, and they believed that the parents were suffering from Munchausen by proxy, and the child was taken away from the parents until it was later found that actually the child was, in fact, she did have a condition. And I won't go too much into the documentary, but it was just, if things like this can happen, and I think 5 times in 5 years Munchausen syndrome by proxy was mentioned, and not once was there any follow-up of it.
I mean,
I
told it really well, but
I told you it would be a struggle, though.
I didn't expect it to end like that. I think that's why. I just thought, the whole process of, him being put through these procedures and things like that was bad enough, but I didn't expect.
No, so there's a lot.
It's so awful for the doctor to have said, like, don't give him water.
Yeah. And there's a lot about the fact that he was getting older. So she couldn't continue these lies, because actually there's going to come a point where he's going to say, Mummy puts things in my feeding tube and makes me poorly. Yeah. And that's why she then had to end it, because she wouldn't have been able to carry it on. There was only so much control she could have over him until kind of he
wasn't interested in she wasn't interested in her like boyfriend's son, who was also
who was 5. Yeah. She
so
only and the same with
babies.
The same with one of her friends that had 2 children. She wasn't interested in the older one. She wanted the baby, because the baby is completely dependent on
do what she
you.
Wants.
Exactly.
Like one of her baby dolls.
Yeah.
Hideous story. Hideous woman.
I know that this has been an incredibly heavy story to listen to, and it was very hard to research and to tell as well. And if you have listened to this and you have been affected by the story, or it's triggering for you or something, we will post a link in the show notes for you, so you can go to that link and get some help.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for telling the story. I know it was a really difficult one. It was difficult enough to hear, so it must have been really difficult for you to tell, but you told it very well, and I think it's good that you've got Garnet's story out there.
If you have enjoyed listening to our episodes, make sure you rate us and leave us a review on whatever platform you are listening.
We absolutely love hearing from you guys. So you can also help support our show by donating to our Buy Me a Coffee link. We will make sure that you get a massive shout out and a big thank you in our next week's episode.
You can also follow us on social media at Perplexed Podcasts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to see more videos and blooper reels, subscribe to our TikTok and YouTube channels.
You can also email us your stories at perplexedpodcasts@gmail.com.
and you can find all the relevant links in the episode descriptions. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.